Welcome, seventh grade readers and writers. This is our second week together with our distance learning, and I wanted to make sure to welcome you to lesson 5. This is the first day of week 2, and we're continuing with our topic this week around the adolescent brain. So, how is the adolescent brain changing? Everyone is growing and developing. The things that we eat, the sleep that we get, the things that we learn are all affecting the development of our brains. So that's our first guiding question. Our second guiding question for this entire topic of study is going to be, how can I make an informed decision about an issue like screen time and then effectively argue my position? Young people all over the country have various access to different kinds of what we call screen time. So when we think about how does screen time affect the development of our brain, we're going to be reading more deeply about that as we go in this topic. Screen time can be anything from watching television to playing video games, to having access to a cell phone and social media like Facebook or Instagram. There are a lot of different ways that young people have access to screens, and the number of minutes in a day, and like through distance learning, that kind of information helps us know more about how we learn well and how it's affecting the development of our brain. So we're going to keep going on that topic. Today, you're going to need materials that are on this slide. It's going to be a new article this week, and it's titled Explainer, This is Your Brain. You will also need your Lesson 5 handout that is in your distance learning packet, and also your Lesson 5 note catcher that gives a short image of that on this screen. So I'm going to have you pause here, make sure you have a pencil, make sure you have your distance learning packet and your note catcher. You can pause this video and I'll wait for you to get back and push play again. All right. Fantastic. So we're ready to go. Today, our learning targets are going to go back to our reading and what we're going to do in today's lesson. Number 1, I can cite several pieces of text-based evidence to support an analysis of an article. So what that really means is you're going to read an article today, and you're going to be looking for pieces of evidence from the article that are going to advance an idea to support your analysis of what you read today. So you would want to be able to say on page 2, it states, right? And you're citing evidence. We'll walk through that more clearly later. That's our first learning target. Our second learning target is that I can use a variety of strategies to determine the meaning of unknown words or phrases. So make sure, as we're going through all of these articles about the adolescent brain and all of this really medical terminology about the brain, that you don't just skip those words. There is room in your note catcher, especially for lesson 5, where you can write down the word and then use some strategies to try and figure out what that word means. Often there are context clues, like if you read the word, there might be a comma, and there might be a definition or an understanding about that word that comes next. Also, you might be able to use your cell phone or maybe even a dictionary in the house to look up the word. There are all kinds of strategies that you can use, but what I encourage you to do as your virtual teacher is don't skip those words. Don't just read past them. Slow down and use your strategies to determine what the meaning of those unknown words are, because it'll probably be important. Now, we are actually today going to read the article together. So I'd like you to pause the video if you need to, so that you can get your copy of your article, like I have mine. And I will read aloud the article for those of you who would enjoy that. And you could also pause the video if that's a distraction for you, but this is like in your classroom when a teacher does a read aloud. And what I would ask you to do is have your eyes on the print. So as I'm reading aloud, word for word, you're actually seeing the words that I'm saying. So for example, some of that vocabulary might come up. And when you hear me say it, you'll see a new word, and that'll help your brain remember all of it. Okay, so we're going to begin our reading now. The title of our article is Explainer. This is your brain. If someone would have been asked 15 years ago to write a short piece about what the different parts of the brain did, it would have been a fairly simple task. Not anymore. Over the last 15 years, the methods used to study the brain have advanced significantly, and with them, so has scientists' understanding of the brain. This makes the task of explaining the most complicated organ in the body, well, complicated. The structure of the brain is certainly well defined, and the more basic of its functions have been generally well mapped. The lower levels, such as the brainstem, regulate functions such as heart rate and breathing. The cerebellum is critical for the control and regulation of movement. More recently, it has also been shown to have a role in higher functions, such as cognition and emotion. The higher levels of the brain, such as the cerebral cortex, more complicated functions come into play. Here, the relationship between function and structure become less clear-cut. Dividing up brain functions. The cortex is divided into two hemispheres, left and right. Each hemisphere has 4 lobes: occipital, parietal, temporal, and frontal. Brain functions have been traditionally assigned to one such lobe and or hemisphere of the brain. These include functions such as vision, language, memory, and problem solving. This division of functions has led to some confusion. The most popular misunderstanding is the belief that there is a distinction between the left logical brain and the right creative brain. In fact, such complicated behaviors are not determined by a specific brain region or even a specific hemisphere. The idea of an almost one-to-one relationship between structure and function are largely a result of lesion studies. These were tests where a certain part of the brain was lesioned or damaged, causing impairments in a particular function. The results led scientists to believe there was a direct relationship between the structure and the function. But as methods for studying the brain improved, this approach was shown to be somewhat simplistic. Networking within the brain. Scientists now understand that complicated, higher-level brain functions are a result of a number of brain areas working together. These brain areas work together in what are called networks. Scientists know this because of methods such as magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. It allows them to scan the brain and look at the regions involved in certain functions. Newer methods also allow scientists to picture the connections between these regions. This is not to say that there is no separation of function throughout the brain. There are brain regions that carry out specialized functions, but they are now thought to do so in combination with other brain regions through network connections. To understand this, it helps to think of the brain as an exceptionally efficient rail network. Certain train stations perform specialized duties, but they do so in conjunction with other stations. They are connected and communicate through the rail network. Language and speech functions. Language can provide a good example of how this occurs in the brain. Language is often thought of as a solely left brain function, and while this is somewhat true, it is certainly not the whole story. There are specific regions in one hemisphere of the brain, usually the left, that are essential for producing and understanding speech. These parts of the brain are known as Broca's area and Wernicke's area. But the other, usually the right, hemisphere of the brain is also involved in language. It is thought to play an important role in recognizing and producing the emotional features of speech. Additionally, the language network involves a number of other left hemisphere regions. These include the prefrontal cortex, premotor cortex, and supplementary motor cortex area. Together, these brain regions perform higher level functions such as mapping words to their meaning. The ever adaptable brain. While there are certain highly specialized brain regions for language, they are still part of an extensive network. These brain regions all work together to produce this complicated function. In addition, the brain is not fixed in its functioning. It is adaptable, which means that it can change over time to meet different needs. After an illness or an injury, for example, the brain can train new regions or networks to take over the functions of damaged areas. So the different parts of the brain are not as simple as they first seem. Scientists believe it is a complicated relationship between structure and function that best describes what the different regions of the brain do, at least for now. Now, that is our read aloud and our article. We're going to be working on this article all week long. So you can imagine just hearing that read aloud and hopefully having watched it with your eyes, there is a lot of vocabulary and also a lot of ideas that are held in this particular reading. So what I would have you do now is kind of pause and think about some of these following ideas on the slide. Remember to think about the following questions, not just as you read, as you listen, but as you now dig back into your work. What is this article mostly about? What did you learn about the brain from this article? I'm going to give you a minute to think about those things. And it seems to me that they talked a lot about function and structure. There was a lot of vocabulary about the brain in this particular article. So it'll typically help us to talk with someone maybe who's home, some family member, caregiver, maybe a friend, to talk about some of these questions. For example, the first question, what is the difference between the structure and the function of the brain? That is in the article a lot. What are the parts of the brain? You could look at some of the visuals that are in the article itself. What are the parts of the brain? Talk about that. And then think about how the brain is like a train network. They talked about that in the article as well. I'm going to give you a few minutes to pause the video, go have that conversation, and then come on back. Fantastic. Welcome back. So we're going to get into the meat of the actual work production today. This is our writing component. And so I'll need you to have your pencil, and we're going to go back to the article. You can listen to the read aloud again if that would be supportive. You can get your pencil out and mark up your article. Take annotations, like right on this article. It's absolutely fine. That is certainly what I did. I don't know if you can see my little orange marker on here, but this is how I annotate when I come across words that I don't know or things that I want to underline. I absolutely engage in my reading with my writing utensil. So your pencil will do just great. And then look at your note catcher. That is the last part of the lesson 5. And you can see that there are little boxes on the top of the first page where you can hold some information, take notes from your article. What is the structure of the brain? What is the function of the brain? And then later in the article, they talk about what are the hemispheres of the brain and what are the lobes of the brain. This particular article this week is going to teach us more about the brain and how it functions before we get into more things about screen time in our weeks to come. So pause this video, take about 15 or 20 minutes, and engage with your article and your note catcher so that you have some things written down in these 4 boxes directly from your article, and any additional notes that you'd like to write down or vocabulary words that you know that you need some practice with. I'm going to have you go ahead and pause the video, take 15 or 20 minutes, and then come on back. Great. Thanks for doing that today. Your lesson 5 note catcher, if I go back here, you will find on pages 1 and 2 of your article a lot of information about the function, higher functions and lower functions of the brain, and also getting into the structure of the brain as well. Even on page 2 at the bottom of the paragraph before you get into the section networking within the brain, they sum up the structure and function very nicely there. And also the picture of the brain on page 2 and that section of the text dividing up brain functions really walks you nicely through the difference between the hemispheres and the lobes. And I hope that you captured some of the vocabulary as you went along as well. This particular article had a lot of it. So share your work with someone in your house or in your learning environment. Give a call, and then after you complete your assignment, make sure that you take an additional 20 minutes to yourself to read something of interest for you today. Beyond this article, maybe other things that you come across or something that you can read online. So I look forward to seeing you in the future. Tomorrow we'll have lesson 6, and I'm your virtual teacher, Miss Hudson. I appreciate your time very much today. Lastly, make sure that you do your fluency practice by using a timer and rereading a piece of the passage for about a minute and see how your fluency is. This particular article has a lot of commas and places to pause, so get a feel for how that fluency is working for you this week. And we'll see you again soon.